Okay, hello everybody. This is a bit different because I'm recording using the camera on my laptop because it's a bit easier, and also because my phone is just awkward to do on my phone. But yes, so apologies because I keep having to look at the camera and keep looking at a monitor to see if the video picture is alright. So this might not work. I might go back to just using my phone, but we'll see how it goes. So recently, yesterday at the time of filming, Bernie Sanders announced he was suspending his campaign. This is not the same as ending it, meaning that if you are in the United States and you wish to vote for Bernie Sanders and your state has not voted yet, you can still do so. His name will still be on the ballot paper, but he is not running with the ambition of becoming the Democratic nominee for president. Now, this has been a long time coming, I think, because whilst Bernie Sanders was the front runner initially, events such as Super Tuesday and other sort of state primaries and caucuses and whatnot have eventually led to Joe Biden being put on the front line, especially because you could say perhaps in the early competition, other sort of moderates like Pete Buttigieg and Amy, whatever her surname was, and people like that were also moderates and perhaps splitting the Biden vote, and one by one people have dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden rather than Bernie Sanders. So this didn't really come as a shock to me. I was not hoping to receive this news ever, but it's happened now, and it's just happened sooner rather than later. And because of sort of political meddling in other countries' elections, generally there is a precedent that if you're a politician from one country, you don't talk about another country's politics. However, I'm not a politician, and since the internet knows no boundaries, no borders, except for China and North Korea, I feel like it's a free enough world for me to talk about this without getting shot or something. If you're a left-winger in America, you're faced with a bit of a problem, because it is such a hub for free market capitalism, and that, combined with the events of the Cold War, have led to a sort of strong dislike of socialism, in particular communism. But fucking Americans love to be like, oh, socialism is communism. Anyway, so that presents you with a problem, and the suitable left-wing alternatives are not strong enough that they can make a difference to election results. But lo and behold, the past two times we have had somebody, Bernie Sanders, coming in with policies that are more left of centre. And I think that ultimately his attempts have not been in vain, and I will talk about that a bit later on. But first of all, I want to talk about why this makes me particularly annoyed, particularly in the context of the fact that this is the second time round that it's happened. Now, I think this says more about the Democratic Party themselves than whether Bernie Sanders is any good or not. Because of the process in which you get to choose your nominee, I think it's down to the fact that people are more unwilling to change, and people are more willing to listen to businesses that give them lots of money than people who are offering a real suitable alternative to Donald Trump. I've long said that the winner of the 2020 presidential election will either be Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump, and now that Bernie Sanders is not going to be on the ballot in November, it will almost certainly be Donald Trump. And the reason why goes back to 2016. Bernie Sanders in that campaign did a similar thing to Donald Trump, but obviously in a much better and nicer way. He was proposing things that were quite radical and hadn't really been talked about very much, and he was doing it in a way that was interesting people, specifically interesting people who weren't normally interested in politics, and people who felt a bit let down. Now, people of the working class sort of urban America, not necessarily rural America, due to their sort of social position, they are more likely to vote for a left-wing candidate. And therefore people like Barack Obama, etc., because they're Democrats, they're meant to be the good guys, but they still felt left behind because that administration wasn't perfect. And there was a certain unrest in not just America, but in the UK as well. We saw it with Brexit, where despite the fact that things seemed like they were going okay, there were a lot of people that had been left behind, even when the economy was stabilising after the financial crash. There were people that were left behind, and there were people that were not happy with their current situation. And really, because capitalism and free market only ever focuses on how the economy's doing great, so we must be fine. Generally, I'm oversimplifying, but that's generally how it goes. These sorts of ideas of people being unhappy still were not really very prevalent, and I think in the UK it goes back to Tony Blair. Things can only get better, everything is fine, when really everything wasn't fine. But because everybody in London was saying everything was fine, it means that everybody who was saying everything wasn't fine was just not listened to. And it kept bubbling and bubbling and bubbling, and it exploded in 2016 with the Brexit referendum. People were voting against Westminster more than anything else, because they thought that this European Union was the root cause of all their problems. And the same thing was happening with America, but with the Obama administration. Donald Trump was offering change. It was a bit of a messy, incoherent change, but it was change nonetheless. And from that point, the Democrats had to offer change as well. And the only change they were seen to be offering is to have a woman as president. Now, I would like to see a female president as much as anybody else. Well, probably more than certain people, but as much as anybody else. But that can't be your only selling point, because Hillary Clinton was a career politician who was slimy and pragmatic and would say anything to get supported. You know, she used to be against same-sex marriage, now she's for it. She used to be against general sort of progressiveness of women's rights, now she's for it, etc., etc., etc. And it just sort of made everybody mad. And I think particularly people from across the world didn't realise just how unpopular Hillary Clinton was. She was essentially a centre-right capitalist politician just like all the others. And what she was offering was A, the fact that she was female, and B, the fact that she wasn't Donald Trump. So when most people who are centre, left-leaning, you know, when they see vote for me because I'm not Donald Trump, well, I don't particularly like her, but I'm going to vote for her because Donald Trump seems like a disaster. But when you're disenfranchised, and when you're desperate, dying for a change, you've been so let down by what's been happening already that you have to have a change. If somebody's promising a change, Donald Trump, and then somebody else is not promising change, you're going to vote for the person who's promising change. Or if Donald Trump puts you off so much, then you're not going to vote at all. And that's why Donald Trump did as well as he did, because he had so many reluctant voters. He didn't get as many votes as Hillary Clinton, but the fact that somebody as awful as he is did as well as he did was down to the fact that people badly needed change, and also people didn't vote. It was a horribly low voter turnout. It was about 55% or something like that, if that. So the Democrats needed to learn a lesson. Donald Trump won the 2016 election off of the unpopularity of the way things were. And the unpopularity amongst certain groups of the Obama administration. So who can the Democrats pick to show that they've learnt their lesson but the vice president of the administration that made so many people vote for Trump in the first place? It's ridiculous. And that is why he won't win. There was a stupid little political thing, I can't remember, it might have been Donald Trump himself or somebody close to him, posted on social media a while back, and it stuck with me. It was a stupid little meme that said, if Joe Biden knew how to fix America, why didn't he tell Obama? And it's meant to be like a funny little, that's so funny, but also a really stupid thing. But actually, in a nutshell, it is why he won't win. If he knows how to sort out everybody's problems, why didn't he already do it? He had 8 years. We have already had a huge flavour of what Joe Biden does with power. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't enough to turn people off of voting for Donald Trump. It wasn't enough to avoid the mass discontent with the political system at the end of 2016 that caused everybody to vote for Trump. What Bernie Sanders was offering was an alternative, a real opponent force. Because essentially, a lot of people, what they wanted to do was to undo Donald Trump, essentially just pretend like it never happened, the 4 years of Trump, if there were to be just 4 years. And that's not enough. What you need is somebody who can allow us, or allow America, to move past Donald Trump, but to change things still. Because people need change, and people need the right change. The change that Donald Trump was going for was completely the wrong thing compared to Bernie Sanders. If you're poor and struggling, you don't need tax breaks for the billionaires. You need free healthcare, or free at the point of use healthcare. And Bernie Sanders wasn't exactly proposing the NHS, but it was as close to that as America would possibly allow. Not only that, but you have many voices on the left who are unhappy with Hillary Clinton's record and are unhappy with Joe Biden's record, and unhappy with how much of a dirtbag Joe Biden is. For example, he voted heavily in favour of the Iraq War. Let's not get into that. But also, he's been consistently against women's rights, in terms of he wasn't that big on the idea of abortion. Other sort of progressive women's rights didn't really kick up much of a fuss about sexual harassment and things like that. He's been accused of it himself by a couple of people. He has been shown to be a little bit creepy with women. And his response to that is going, oh yeah, well, I'm going to have a female running mate. Great. American media goes crazy. Woo, yeah, Joe Biden's our saviour. That's not going to be enough to win the election. And that's not a counterpoint to everything that you're being attacked for. And it's things like that that are going to put certain people on the left in America off. And it's what put people off Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders has a very specific support base. And as I said before, when Hillary Clinton became the Democratic nominee, lots of people didn't vote. And I believe that Bernie Sanders would get more people to vote for him than for Joe Biden. Hardcore Democrats would not ever vote for Trump. They would never vote for Trump because he's just too ridiculous. And we know that, because they all voted for Hillary Clinton to keep Trump out. They would vote for any Democrat to keep Trump out. That's guaranteed. If it was Bernie Sanders, they wouldn't then switch to Trump because they voted for Hillary Clinton to keep Trump out, not because they liked Hillary Clinton's policies necessarily, but because they so badly didn't want Trump. And people who are in a similar mindset, who don't want 4 more years of Trump, would vote for Bernie anyway. But Bernie also has his unique support base that's really sort of turns on and listens to his progressive policies. And with Joe Biden, you'd get the hardcore Democrat supporters anyway, but I think Bernie's specific group of supporters would be turned off. They wouldn't vote for Trump, but they wouldn't vote for Biden. They just wouldn't vote. Or they'd vote for the Green Party or somebody else. So Joe Biden won't amass enough votes from non-Republicans to create a large enough support base to win over Trump's current support base. And he certainly won't, for the reasons that I explained before, win over parts of Donald Trump's support base. And in fact, there are arguments put forward that Bernie Sanders probably would have won over some of Trump's support base anyway, whereas Joe Biden probably wouldn't. So it's for those 2 reasons: A, he will not win over any of Donald Trump's supporters, and B, he will not win over people that don't vote. Those 2 things Bernie would have done, and those 2 things Joe Biden will not do. And that is why, in my eyes, I believe he will not win the election against Donald Trump, and we must brace ourselves and prepare ourselves for 4 more years of Donald Trump in the White House. So do I have any messages of hope, any sort of optimism? Well, yes, I do. Vote for Bernie Sanders if you're American and you're a Bernie supporter. Vote for Bernie Sanders in the primary still. His name will still be on the ballot, and the more delegates he gets, even though it might not be enough to win, will mean that he has a greater influence over the policy platform. So there's a chance that even if Joe Biden is the nominee, he will run on a more progressive platform than he would have. So that might be able to increase his chances of winning and increase his chances of offering real change. Secondly, you should probably vote for Joe Biden in the November elections, because Trump's a fucking idiot. And last but not least, it's important to remember that whilst Bernie Sanders may not have any career positions to show for this 5 years that he's been campaigning, he has still made a huge impact on the Democratic Party's thinking. Issues like his sort of free healthcare proposals are now being seriously debated within the party, whereas they weren't before. And not only that, but there's a wealth of other things, such as the Green New Deal, that are being seriously considered amongst the Democratic Party's mainstream. Not only that, but he's inspired many sort of younger politicians, for example Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who will no doubt inspire a generation once they're a bit older and become leading formidable figures in the Democratic Party, carrying on those progressive views, maybe even presidential candidates themselves someday. So all is not lost. There is some hope amongst the doom and gloom, but there is still a bit of doom and gloom, obviously. If you disagree, let me know in the comments and I'll probably read it and reply to it. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully, given the current situation, I'll be doing a lot more videos. So yes, hopefully I'll see you very soon.